This session is a little longer compared to our previous sessions, but don't worry because it's a very easy session and we just learned two new CSS properties and something about CSS selectors, so don't worry when you see the length of the video is a bit longer. In this session, I am going to fix everything section by section. And what do I mean by that? I mean, I first fix this part, then I go make this exactly as it looks like here, and then I go on and I go on. And another thing, I know this logo here means go ahead and attach your own image here, but I want to design everything exactly as it is here. So, and let's just start by first the box shadow and text shadow that we have in these two. For example, if you take a look at here, there's a text shadow and this div has a box shadow. If you really take a look at it, maybe in fact in this video you do not see the shadow very clearly, because my experience shows that in a screen recorder apps, usually these box shadows, they don't seem to be seen very well. So in fact, you can go ahead to this Figma website and check it for yourself. So let's just start by this box shadow thing. Well, you can check out this website, boxshadow.dev. It's a tool for us to help us in order to create a good looking box shadow. As you can see, this is a div here, and this is the background of it. And again, since screen recorders do not work well with this box shadow, I go ahead and check this main here, and for myself, it has given it a background color of this RGB code is exactly something like hex code. We will talk about it, but imagine it's just a color code like hex code. Let's uncheck this background color, and let's give it a background color of red for ourselves. Red, okay. And now the background color is red. I think the box shadow is being shown very better on your screen, I believe. And this is a tool for us to just work with this and create a nice box shadow for ourselves. For example, after you're finished with this tool here, you can click here on shadow code. Show code, and you can see there's a box shadow CSS property, which it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arguments. And the first argument is x-axis, y-axis, and this blur radius and this spread radius is the 4 arguments, and the last argument is the color. Well, RGB, we saw RGB here. Let's go ahead again on this inspect here. For example, let's create something here, and as you can see, it has a box shadow. If you really take a look at this, and on inspect element, go ahead and once again use this. As you can see, it is a RGB code. RGB code is like hex exactly, okay? But RGBA, for example, any hex color could be converted to RGB. For example, if you go, for example, this hex code that is here, this E5, it's a code for gray. You can go here and to RGB, search for 2RGB, and as you can see, the RGB code for this will be shown here, and you can use it in your code. And if you already knew about this color codes, imagine that this course is for those who are starting for absolute zero. So I am trying to cover everything. So RGB is exactly right, like kind of like hex code, but it's just a different formula. So what is this RGBA here that is being used? The A argument, you can add a fourth argument in RGBA, which the last one is opacity. For example, if I remove this one, you can see it comes complete black. This complete black is RGB 0, 0, 0 red, 0 green, 0 blue is complete black. So this is what I come up with. It might not be exactly as it is here, but I wanted to use something darker and than what is being used. So I can hit copy here, close, and use this box shadow for our diff. So get back to our codes here and close this all. And in the card that we have, I use this box shadow, and here I can customize it again and manipulate these numbers that we have. And this is it. And instead of RGBA, this is personal, this RGB, because some people use RGB and RGBA, they like it more. Some people try to use hex code. But they both are okay, and none of them is wrong. But me personally like to use hex code, so I use hashtag CCC, and the CCC stands for gray. As you can see, this is a thing that has been opened here and shows us where the color stands exactly, and that's what a CCCC looks like. Okay, let's get back here to our code, hit refresh, and as you can see, I have that box shadow, which isn't very good looking. It's not looking nice, so let's go ahead and change it. Maybe in your screen, this box shadow thing, I stopped saying that, but if for the last time, this box shadowing thing that we have might be different in my screen and your screen. But if we finally have the same code and open the final result with browser ourselves, we will have the same result. So let's get back to our code, and let's use something very, very, very less here. If you do not have this, let's use E. If you do not have this color picker like I do, don't forget to watch season 0. And in season 0, I've installed so many packages for my VS Code. So don't miss out season 0, never. So let's get back to our codes. I maybe manipulate this a little bit more to finally come up with something good. No, I wanted to make it darker, not lighter. I said why this is acting like that. I was talking and I forgot. I wanted to make it a bit darker. This AAA. So let's use AAA. Let's continue with this, but we could have make it so much better. So this logo here, it will be used for our text shadow, and text shadow is pretty much similar to what we have. So let's search text shadow generator CSS. And so what I'm trying to say is, for box shadow and text shadow, first use these tools to create a good thing, and then get the code and use it in your project. And as you can see, for box shadow, for text shadow, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 arguments, like we had in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. So for this logo here that we had in white area, logo here, so I give it a class of logo, h2 class logo, and I go ahead and select this logo thing that we had. And let's introduce something even more. I can say white area and give it a space and give it an arrow and say, look at this code that we have. Does it logo, the class that logo that I gave it, and give it a text shadow. This is a box shadow, but first let's use a text shadow instead of box shadow. And instead of this RGB 0 that we have, I'm going to use our pink that we had here. This is our pink. I go ahead and copy this. This is our text shadow. Paste it here. Use the pound sign behind it. And this is it. And this basically means that go ahead and select everything which has a logo class and is a child of white area. So if you take a look at this white area, this div here is a child of it. This div 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 as is. So the children, the exact children. So this dot logo here will not be considered as its children, because first when I wrote this, I thought that the logo is exactly inside this white logo. So I'd rather use only a space character. When you use, for example, let's say when you use a space dot white area, a space dot logo, it means dot logo which is any children. So it doesn't matter if it's nested, it's children of children of children of that. So it goes and selects everything here, and it became maybe a good example for us to understand the difference between this arrow and the space selector. The space selector selects all of the children of children, the children of children of children, everything. But this character, we would select only children, the first children, only the first children, not grandchildren's and the rest. So do know about these selectors, because this is something that is commonly used, and this nested selecting is very good, because when you randomly go ahead, for example, and select a logo class, when someone else comes and reads your code, he doesn't exactly has an idea that where is logo exactly. Okay, and so many times you for example, it passes 2 months or 3 months, and after 3 months you come back and read your own code, and this pretty much happens. Very even experienced developers, when they come back and read their own code, sometimes they don't understand it sometimes. So that's why writing a clean code and best practices, they help us to don't have these kind of problems. For example, if someone comes back after 3 months and cannot understand his own code, it means he's not writing a good code. So he has to take these best practices more seriously. So that's why we are using, again, I think it's, in my opinion, it's very much better to write it like this. Rather, this is completely fine. This is completely fine. Goes ahead and selects everything that has a logo class and it assigns this box shadow, and it completely works just fine. But this one is better, since this is nested and is telling us go ahead and select any logo that is inside this white area. And when you come back and read your own code, even you immediately understand, oh, this logo is something that inside this white area, right? So this is, I think, better. So let's get back to our codes and hit refresh. It's not working. Maybe it has 3 arguments rather than 4 arguments. So hit refresh. Yes, it's working now. The text shadow has been appeared. And again, if it's not on your screen, just trust me, there is, because I have experienced that these things. Oh, it's opacity. I thought it has it has 1, 2, 3, and this 2 is all color. So it has 4 arguments totally. So the previous time I gave it 5 arguments, so that's what happened, and that's why it wasn't working. So the first argument is x-axis, then y-axis, and the blur effect. So the blur effect is something that I want to be minimal and make it to 2 pixels, and instead of 4 pixels, let's use 2 pixel, 2 pixel, and 2 pixel text shadow. And I think it's better. And the color here, sorry, I made it different. The color is pink and the text shadow is gray. So let's again fix it. Color is our pink here. So let's use this and clean this. And this is something that I want to use. Not 4 A's or 3 or 6 A's. That's what should you write. And it kind of looks the same, except the font family font is different. So next session, what I'm gonna do in next session is to change the font, because this is using some other font and this is using some other font. So that's why we have a pretty much different result. So in next session we are going to use it because it has some notes about this font. So that's why I'm going to leave it for the next session. And let's tell you something, guys. We can kind of define variable in CSS. And what do I mean by CSS? You can see I always go and find this pink color that I use or the blue color that I use. Every time I go copy that, so I can actually define variable in CSS. In order to have define variables in CSS, what you need to do is to create something usually at the first thing in your CSS file, and write root and open this brackets. Here you define some variables, for example, and the variable names in CSS are, they start with 2 dashes, and I call it, for example, pink, pink. And the pink variable that I use is exactly this here. So, and let's go ahead and instead of this thing that we have, I hit Control D, and hit Control. These are the 3 times. These are 3 highlighted. I clean them, and now let's use var. So I'm telling, so instead of hard coding that, I'm going to say go and use the pink that we have, pink variable that we have. So this is it, and as you can see, it's using the pink variable that we have instead of that. So every time, so from now on, I don't need to be worried what was the code. Go ahead, find it, paste it, copy it. I just can use this pink. So why I said kind of variable, I didn't say variable, because they're actually constants, not variable. Because variable in other languages means that you go ahead and set a value to a variable, and you might change it in future, and you may change it and change it and change it. That's why that's called variable. So these are not exactly variables, they are constants. And since people use the variable word for this, and even look at this is from var, so that's why we keep using the word variable for this things in root. So that's why we continue using the word variable. So that's it, that's for this session. That's all I wanted you to learn, and we have come to a good place. And before going to our blue, this is not blue. Some people might it's rather let's use our blue here, because girls probably not watching this, and because usually girls are more about colors, and they hate when people use wrong names for colors. But I've seen that boys usually don't care and use whatever name for their color. So this is blue, whether you like it or not. I call it blue. So instead of this here, I am going to use actually var hash this blue thing that we have, and this is okay, and everything is okay. Yes. So that's it. Let's go to our PowerPoint. This session took a bit longer than usual because whenever I face an error, some people trim or cut those bugs, or when they face an error, they clean that section from their video, they go fix that error themselves, and they come back to recording. But I don't want to do that. I am just kind of live. It's kind of live rather than recording, because I am writing codes, and I'm like this, whatever comes up, let's go ahead and write code. And when something comes up, I do not delete that from my video, because I want you to see when I face an error or when I face a bug, how do I fix it or how do I manage it. I sometimes even search in Google. So that's why I do not cut or trim those parts from my videos. Sometimes my videos get a little longer. So let's very fast sum up very fast what we learned. And the first thing was that about RGB method is like just hex code, and they're very similar. And the thing about the opacity thing that we said, don't forget that. And we saw how we can use variable or maybe constants in CSS. And we will see these differences even more. That's how I use selectors in CSS, and pretty much I use this space selector and this angle bracket selector very often. And the thing about box shadow and text shadow that we learned, they had box shadow receives one more argument compared to text shadow, and this is what they do. And you saw two websites for the first one was boxshadow.dev, and the other one you just can simply search in Google and find a text shadow CSS generator. So that's it. Hope to see you in next session.